Daniel chapter 4. King Nebuchadnezzar, to all peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied to you. It has seemed good to me to show the signs and wonders that the Most High God has done for me. How great are his signs, how mighty his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion endures from generation to generation. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at ease in my house and prospering in my palace. I saw a dream that made me afraid. As I lay in bed, the fancies and the visions of my dream of my head alarmed me. So I made a decree that all the wise men of Babylon should be brought before me, that they might make known to me the interpretation of the dream. Then the magicians, the enchanters, the Chaldeans, and the astrologers came in, and I told them the dream, but they could not make known to me its interpretation. At last, Daniel came in before me, he who was named Belshazzar, after the name of my God, and in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. And I told him the dream, saying, O Belshazzar, chief of the magicians, because I know that the spirit of the holy gods is in you, and that no mystery is too difficult for you, tell me the visions of my dream that I saw and their interpretation. The visions of my head as I lay in bed were these. I saw, and behold, a tree in the midst of the earth, and its height was great. The tree grew and became strong, and its top reached to heaven, and it was visible to the end of the whole earth. Its leaves were beautiful, and its fruit abundant, and in it was food for all. The beasts of the field found shade under it, and the birds of the heavens lived in its branches, and all flesh was fed from it. I saw in the visions of my head as I lay in bed, and behold, a watcher, a holy one, come down from heaven. He proclaimed aloud and said thus, chop down the tree and lop off its branches, strip off its leaves and scatter its fruit. Let the beasts flee from under it and the birds from its branches, but leave the stump of its roots in the earth, bound with a band of iron and bronze, amid the tender grass of the field. Let him be wet with the dew of heaven. Let his portion be with the beast in the grass of the earth. Let his mind be changed from a man's, and let a beast's mind be given to him. And let 7 periods of time pass over him. The sentence is by the decree of the watchers, the decision by the word of the holy ones, to the end that the living may know that the Most High rules the kingdom of man, and gives it to whom he will, and sets over it the lowliest of men. This dream I, King Nebuchadnezzar, saw, and you, O Belshazzar, tell me the interpretation, because all the wise men of my kingdom are not able to make known to me the interpretation, but you are able, for the spirit of the holy gods is in you. Then Daniel, whose name was Belshazzar, was dismayed for a while, and his thoughts alarmed him. The king answered and said, Belshazzar, let not the dream or the interpretation alarm you. Belshazzar answered and said, My lord, may the dream be for those who hate you, and its interpretation for your enemies. The tree you saw, which grew and became strong, so that its top reached to heaven, and it was visible to the end of the whole earth, whose leaves were beautiful and its fruit abundant, and in which was food for all, under which the beasts of the field found shade, and in whose branches the birds of the heavens lived. It is you, O king, who have grown and become strong. Your greatness was grown and reaches to heaven, and your dominion to the ends of the earth. And because the king saw a watcher, a holy one, coming down from heaven and saying, chop down the tree and destroy it, but leave the stump of its roots in the earth, bound with a band of iron and bronze, in the tender grass of the field, and let him be wet with the dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the beast of the field, till 7 periods of time pass over him. This is the interpretation, O king. It is a decree of the Most High, which has come upon my lord the king, that you shall be driven from among men, and your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field. You shall be made to eat grass like an ox, and you shall be wet with the dew of heaven. And 7 periods of time shall pass over you, till you know that the Most High rules the kingdom of men and gives it to whom he will. And as it was commanded to leave the stump of the roots of the tree, your kingdom shall be confirmed for you and the time that you know that heaven rules. Therefore, O king, let my counsel be acceptable to you. Break off your sins by practicing righteousness, and your iniquities by showing mercy to the oppressed, that there may be perhaps a lengthening of your prosperity. All this came upon King Nebuchadnezzar. At the end of 12 months, he was walking on the roof of the royal palace of Babylon, and the king answered and said, is not this great Babylon, which I have built by my power as a royal residence and for the glory of majesty? While the words were still in the king's mouth, there fell a voice from heaven. O King Nebuchadnezzar, to you it is spoken. The kingdom has departed from you, and you shall be driven from among men, and your dwelling shall be with the beast of the fields. And you shall be made to eat grass like an ox, and 7 periods of time shall pass over you, until you know that the Most High rules the kingdom of men and gives it to whom he will. Immediately, the word was fulfilled against Nebuchadnezzar. He was driven from among men and ate grass like an ox, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven till his hair grew as long as eagle's feathers, and his nails were like bird's claws. At the end of the days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted my eyes to heaven, and my reason returned to me. And I blessed the Most High and praised and honored him who lives forever. For his dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the inhabitants of the earth are accounted as nothing, and he does according to his will among the host of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth. And none can stay his hand or say to him, what have you done? At this time, my reason returned to me. And for the glory of my kingdom, my majesty and splendor returned to me. My counselors and my lord sought me, and I was established in my kingdom. And still more greatness was added to me. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor the King of heaven, for all his works are right and his ways are just. And those who walk in pride, he is able to humble. May the Lord add a blessing to the reading of his word.
It's fascinating in these weeks, if you've noticed, the last 3 weeks, each chapter has a giant, horrific object that has to be dealt with. It represents kingdoms and a man, specifically Nebuchadnezzar. Before, it represented kingdoms and other gods and powers. This time, it's going to represent him, the king himself. And today, we're going to talk about his pursuit of power and control, the lion of control. If there's one way that I could describe this chapter, it would be this. What is Nebuchadnezzar teaching us? Surrender or be eaten, because he was eaten by the lion of control. It ate up his life. What does that mean? Well, if we look at this passage, it seems like Daniel's writing it, but he might be writing it for somebody. In other words, it's like Nebuchadnezzar has written it himself. Think about this. He has published a decree. This is a decree that he has sent out to all of the people of his empire. This is the stuff that you get as a government email. Notice to everybody, okay? And that is what he's saying about, here is who I was, here's how I was eaten by the lion of control and power, and here's how there is a more superior authority over me and how it changed me. And it's an amazing story of humiliation, but also of redemption. That after a man would be so proud, after he had proclaimed, he fell down in chapter 2 before Daniel and the others because he interpreted the dream. In Daniel 3 that we looked at last week, he proclaimed there is no other God who can save like this. And yet a little time later, the thirst and the drive and the swelling of pride in his heart made him forget maybe those earlier praises and testimonies. And so he becomes proud again. And that's what the lion of control does. That's what this idol does. It kind of numbs us, but it grows in our lives until our hearts, it's not an instantaneous thing. We don't go from soft heart to hard heart. We don't go from beautifully curated garden to a garden overrun by weeds. This takes time and springs up. Our hearts get hardened over time. And as you look back, you have to wonder, what is it that has kept me at distance or maybe striving for control when I didn't used to do that? When before there was a time in my life when God really softened my heart and worked on me. And this is the story of Nebuchadnezzar's testimony. You didn't know that maybe a Babylonian king wrote portions of Scripture, did you? And so here's a leader. Here's a guy who has every right to take control, except the one right that there is a God above you who is in control, and he refused to acknowledge that. So here's two things to begin with. Number one, when things are good, and I don't have these on slides, these are extra bonus material, okay? We're going to start with like antipasti here, okay? The bonus material, number one, when things are good and satisfied, because it says here in the very first verses, we saw this, I was at my palace, I was at home, and all was good in the kingdom. This is the dream of almost every guy on the planet. Got my own castle, my own planet, kids are quiet, all is good. All right? This is the desire to be in control. Not only is my house good, my kingdom's good. I have reached the goal, the end. This is it. And he was contented in himself until the Lord said, I have one more area to deal with you. And that is, who's really in charge here in this world? You or me? And he sends a dream into Nebuchadnezzar's head. Now, before we get to the dream, there is a sense that when everything is good and you are satisfied, you start to act like an atheist. Atheism flourishes in affluent places. We have a lot of people declaring they're atheists today until you start seeing the effects of suffering, pain, and war and disease. At that time, you start to see evil. And when you start seeing evil, you know every person, Solomon wrote, or Q as we say, wrote in Ecclesiastes, the wise man, and he said, eternity has been written into the hearts of every man. Every man and woman knows that deep down inside, something's wrong with our universe, and it can be different. We know it's inherently wrong when we see the suffering. We know it's wrong. And therefore, the reason we know it's wrong is because we know that there is somebody who can make it different or who did make it different. And our hearts are longing for correction, restoration, strength, or changing of it. Reconciliation of this world back to the one who made it, the Creator. But when you live in a time or a place or in a season of your life where you're pretty satisfied, you got enough pay, things are going decently well, doing your work, quote unquote, living the dream, whatever dream that is, you don't need God. And that's when atheism flourishes. A lot of people out there saying, I don't need God. You don't need God yet, but you will. Richard Dawkins. How many of you have heard of Richard Dawkins? Just lift your hand if you're willing to admit that you've heard of him. Richard Dawkins was one of the prominent founders of what's called neo-atheism, or the neo-atheist movement. And Richard Dawkins responds to it's a much more it's not just a passive atheism, it's a much more aggressive atheism. It's a proponent that there is no God. Well, we'll tell you why. And Richard Dawkins is famous for just being very blunt and very direct. And he wrote, and he basically said that horrific pain, I'm just kind of quoting him, horrific pain is unproblematic in a moral setting because there really aren't any morals if the universe is cold. And his claim is the universe is cold. All the forces in the universe and the cosmology of the world and the universe means that everything is working together just by natural forces as they've adapted to one another. There's not a meta-narrative. There's not an orchestrator. There's not somebody in charge. This is just the cold, hard facts of science, and the universe is cold. And so what he's saying is when you encounter sadness, when you work hard for justice and you want to right things that are wrong, when you want to protect your kids, when you want to love them well, you want to point them to Christ, when you want to live well, you sacrifice for God, family, country, you name it. All of those good and noble things are worthless because the universe is cold. It's just dead forces. So when we encounter horrific pain, starvation, struggling, hatred, and war, the universe is doing exactly what it was designed to do. He said, he may have used the word design, but without designer. It's the natural forces are doing exactly what they're supposed to do. And that is just keep going. And you're just a part of the material stuff, the matter that's running around on a planet. That's Dawkins' view. But the Bible says, no, there's no way that mankind can be not created and can be atheists at the same time declare there is no God. Psalmist David said, only a fool says in his heart, there is no God. Only a fool will proclaim that. A fool who wants to have control of his own world or her own world, his own life. When Christianity presents, especially here in Daniel 4, because we're talking about great global lessons, that there is a God who reigns above our nations and our countries and our world today. There is a meta-narrative, and it's anchored in a sovereign Lord. There is a plan for history, and he is moving it along, and nothing surprises him. This is the sovereign, providential ruler of our universe, and he stands in heaven in his body, identifying with us. His name is Jesus Christ, Lord of Lords. That's what the Bible presents. That's what Daniel 4 is presenting. It is a great global answer to atheism and pride. Now, when Christians look at a world, and we have this understanding from the Word, we say, no, we relinquish control. God, you have control, but look, God, we see, and this is where lament comes in. It's a form of prayer. It's a form of tears. It's a form of worship. Lament comes into our hearts, and we lament, God, the situation is like this. You didn't promise that it would be. You didn't make it this way. Oh, God, change this world around me because I know it can be changed, and I have no one else to appeal to but you. That's what Christianity answers. Anybody who actually cares for someone else or for something else in this world is admitting right there that there's a God. because you can't just say, we can be indifferent. But Nebuchadnezzar was. He was sitting in his palace saying, I'm good. Daniel later in the dream and the interpretation says, you need to relinquish from your sins. You need to get rid of those. You need to stop and turn the other direction. You need to care with mercy for the poor, all the people who are under you, because you're not doing it. Daniel will get to that. That's how we know that Nebuchadnezzar was practicing atheism until God says, no, you can't do that anymore. And he puts in his mind this dream. Now, before we come to it, also, point 2 is that God, because he's ruling, God is here. We know that he runs our world. And it even says in this passage, it says here, that God puts men, even the lowly, in charge. He will remove kings and put lowly people in charge. Why? Because it's his disposition to run all governments and all authority. It is his desire. He has authority to do it. He's the God of control, not us. That's an encouragement to us in this chapter. I don't have time to go into all these elements and symbols yet, but I just want you to know that, I built a slide for it. Because God reigns right here and right now, he is working on some world leader somewhere. Just pray that it's yours. And that's one of the teachings here. God is not distant. We do not practice deism. Deism says God spun the world up like a clock and then sent it forward and then he backed off. And he let the world just kind of go as it is. And we're just fending for ourselves and we're working for ourselves. No, that's not our God. Our God is intimately involved in the affairs of men. And he is the one who rules over all nations, all countries. And here's an encouragement for us. God still looks at the hearts of leaders. He's working on somebody today. Do you believe that? Because he's in control, he's working on the hearts of people who think that they're in control. And that's an encouragement for you. So pray that it's yours. I think we should be praying for Putin. You might laugh at that. I'm not. The guy's a murderer. He's a thug. Yes, he deserves incredible punishment. And we need to be praying for him that God would convert his very heart because he's acting like he is Lord of this universe. My prayer, I don't know what yours is, that he gets thrown in prison with a Bible by himself for a long time. And that the Lord works on his heart. But you also, at the same time, if you pray for him, you've got to pray for Zelensky. Because even he has to bow the knee before the Lord. He can't say, for the glory of Ukraine alone. It has to be for the glory of God. It's the same thing for President Xi in China. It's the same thing for President Biden. I encourage the first service to pray for Meloni. We have a lady prime minister and her administration. But even for our very own mayors where we were, I'm going to encourage you, do you know your base commander? Can you pray for him? Why? Because when you do, you are admitting that there is a God who reigns over them and that you do believe that he can work on their souls and change them. That he is governing even you through them. Now, a lot of you think President Biden can't change because he's 185 years old. It's too late. Keep praying. God's older. He knows. All right, just throw that in for a smile. So we're going to talk about, and we saw in the first part of this chapter, we're going to talk about the dream here. We're going to talk about the dream who's in complete control. We're going to talk about the warning that comes for those who think they're in complete control. We're going to talk about the insanity of those who are self-satisfied right now. And we're going to talk about the praise that comes in worship of the fully satisfied. The dream first. Who's in complete control? Daniel comes and Daniel's the last one to be called, if you notice. And Nebuchadnezzar is telling everyone that he waited again for Daniel. Now, in this case, the Chaldeans, they arrive to interpret the dream, but they don't say anything. Why don't they say anything? Because we're in this third major issue and interpretation that we've seen over the last 3 chapters of some object that's very big that gets cut down. So they're really silent because they're like 3 times we're starting to get the sense of this. The tree's probably you, and you're probably going to get cut down. We don't want to say it. They can't help him because they don't want to state the obvious. So at last, he finally calls for Daniel. And he admits so much. He calls for Daniel, and Daniel arrives. And he starts to tell him this dream. And he has this picture of this tree that gives, if you will, that's in control of the entire universe. Back in ancient days and ancient times, there was an understanding. You can read this in narratives about ancient history. There were times where they thought there was a life force embodied in a tree that stretched up into heaven. The trunk and the leaves and everything, and the fruit was in the world. It covered and cared for the people of the world. And then its roots stretched down into the underworld. And in the underworld, it could control, and it had its power also there, and it was drawing up this force. And the king could embody this cosmic tree of goodness and care. And so that's really what he's dreaming. And the Lord put it in his mind, and it alarmed him. And you're looking at this, and you're saying, man, that looks like a video game, like you took that picture from a video game, Pastor Rob, and stuck it up there. It's a dream. You got to give me some liberty, to find pictures. Really hard to find Nebuchadnezzar's dream picture here. All right? So it's true, but the alarming thing is going to come because Daniel says, yes, this tree is you. God has given you an expansive reach, and I just want you to think about, there's so much symbolism, and I don't want to keep us here too long, but I do want you to think about some important details. One, it's huge, and it stretches to heaven, meaning it's allowed by God to grow. 2, it provides protection. There are many birds and also animals that are nesting and resting underneath the tree. Then it provides food. It's giving food out to the world. And this would have fit their understanding of a cosmic tree of blessing or power in the universe that provides, and that the king was doing it. And Daniel says yes. But it is God who is providing for the world through you, Nebuchadnezzar. The problem is you don't see that. You think you are the tree in heaven, on earth, and under the earth. And that's what pride does. That's what the desire for control does. I want to control everything. I don't want to have someone else tell me what to do or to be in control of my own world. Now, what does that tree sound like, by the way, in the dream? We've already heard something like this. What would it sound like? Anybody want to poke a guess at it? Yeah, tree of paradise, the tree of life. So I said that this book is written to the Jews. So when a Jew is hearing this, what would they have thought of? And right now you're expecting me to turn to a slide of the temple and to show you that. And there is that symbolism, but instead I'm going to go back to the Garden of Eden, so it's not the temple. They would have heard about the tree in paradise, the tree of life. But there's another tree there. And what tree is that? Knowledge of good and evil. Now watch what's happening. When they hear about the tree of life, when they hear these images, and the language is very similar, then the recipients of the letter would go back to the time in the Garden of Eden when man tried to take control, when he was eaten alive by the lion or the lie of control. So they go back to the Garden of Eden. Now, God placed the tree of life there, and he told his children, Adam and Eve, that they should eat from it. Why are they children? They are full adults. They are fully capable. They are walking, they are reasoning, they are studying, they are naming the animals, and they are called to procreate and multiply. Okay? So they are not kids physically or mentally. Well, maybe not mentally. They are kids or children spiritually. So the tree of life gives them food while they are in service and learning from God himself. It sustains life, just like the tree in Nebuchadnezzar's dream. Lots of fruit and lots of food. It's a sustaining tree. It's a tree by which You come in and you receive, if you will, food and nutrients so that you can grow. That's why we say, if I can just connect it to Jesus being the tree of life, when you turn to Christ, he gives you what? Nutrients, Paul says, like a newborn baby, so that you grow into maturity. That's what the tree of life's food was about. It was to help Adam and Eve to grow and serve him. It was a priestly tree, a service tree before God. That's what a priest does. It serves God on this earth. That's what that tree was for. But there was another tree, and we know the knowledge of good and evil is the other one. And God said, not this one, at least not yet. And there's a hint of that at the end of Genesis 2. Now, what he's saying is, Adam and Eve, it's not that you can never eat from this tree, it's just not now. You have to wait for me because I'm waiting for you to do what? To grow up, to become mature. Because this tree is different. This tree of the knowledge of good and evil means it's a tree of decision making. It's a control tree. It's a power tree. You become a judge. And if you will demonstrate your maturity to say, I'm going to let God be judge until he trains me and shares of this knowledge to me. I'm not going to take control for myself early. Then one day God was going to take Adam and Eve and walk them to the other tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and he was going to have communion with them there. He was going to promote them. They were going to pin on their stars. Literally. He was going to promote them, and probably then we wouldn't have faced sin. Way to go, Mom and Dad, right? So in other words, that tree is a kingly tree. The other one is a service priestly tree, tree of life. It's meant for growth. The knowledge of good and evil is meant for, if you will, that you will make kingly decisions recognizing who is above God in the light and the honor and the person of God himself. But what did Adam and Eve do? They took control, didn't they? Because even Satan said in the temptation, if you take from this tree and eat, then you will become like God himself. The problem is you just need to take control. And they bought into the lie. And when they bought into the lie, what happened? They fell from power and control out of the garden and down the mountain. And what did God have to do? How did he dress them? They had to be clothed. He dressed them with skins of animals that he had to sacrifice. And if they're dressed in furs and skins of animals, what do they look like? It's a Sunday school answer. Animals. It's animals. In other words, to take control is to not become more fully human. To try to have control is to become, if you will, more isolated, more sinful, and to snap mentally and to become more or less human and more animalistic than we would have ever thought. Because we become hungrier and hungrier for control instead of relinquishing it before God. This is how tricky control is. I just want to tell you that we look at Nebuchadnezzar, we look at Adam and Eve and say, well, that's them, that's their world. Hey, that's all of us. We have the term in English, control freaks. Everybody's a control freak. We're all trying to control our worlds. And here's the deal. Often if we don't control our worlds, we just bring the limits of control down small enough until we can. We just make them smaller. This is my area of control. This is my area of dominance, right? So it's really easy for us to say this. How many of you believe this? And you can wave your hand. It's really easy to go, do you believe that God is in control of the whole universe and is running it today? Just wave your hand if you believe that. Great. In what part of your heart, what small area is he not in control? See the contrast? Oh yeah, we say it. We'll sing it. God's in control of the whole world, but not this little tiny little part right here. No, you're not going in there. Why? Because I have to be in control there. we got to be equals, at least here, because I've cut the measurements and it is tailor-made for me, not necessarily implicating you, Taylor, yourself. Okay? So the Jews would have heard this. Nebuchadnezzar is refiguring Adam. And he's going to have to become a new Adam. So he is going to refigure or be discipled by Daniel, to be like Daniel, and to become like Christ. He's going to prefigure Christ. Let's watch how this goes. So that's what the Jews would have heard, because the axe comes to the bottom of the tree, cuts him down, and he becomes like a stump, if you will, of the field. But then he is allowed to grow again, to start over, to begin anew. Can I say it this way? To be born again. There's a second birth for Nebuchadnezzar. But this is so gracious of God, isn't it, in this whole story, that he would give him a second birth, a new way out. Nebuchadnezzar was a tyrant and an overlord, and he was wicked, and he was very proud, and he killed, and he didn't care about it, and he was merciless at different times of his life. And yet God still loved him enough to come and show him grace and say, I'm going to take the bands off and I'll let you grow again. And Nebuchadnezzar makes that decree to all of his empire. And he tells all of them, you see, he could have easily written something that just said, new simple decree alert, we have changed gods in Babylon. We're doing the King Yahweh thing now. And that's it. But instead he talks about his whole story. This is why we are and how we are, and I call to everyone to follow me. All right, that's the first. There is a dream, if you will, or there's a sentence in the dream for those who think they have total control. Now let's move into the warning about those who think they have total control, because that's what we see next. Daniel comes and he starts to interpret the dream. And as he interprets the dream, there's a beautiful phrase. I think it's in verse 19. And it says that Daniel, when he heard the king's dream, and the king called out to him and said, Daniel, what does it mean? Daniel stands, and the word is motionless in Hebrew. He's frozen. Why? Because it says he's alarmed and scared. Why would Daniel be alarmed and scared? This isn't about him. In a sense, it is, because if the king gets chopped down, so does Daniel, and so does all the things that God is working on through Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego with him. But there's another reason, and that's because he says, I don't wish this sentence and this interpretation even on your worst enemies. But I have to tell you, it is for you, and Daniel's reason is because Daniel's become a friend of Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel has a pastor's heart for him. He stops, he waits because he cares. And he says, Nebuchadnezzar, you don't have to go this route. If you will but simply confess and repent, yes. So the tree is you. Yes, you get chopped down. Yes, you get bound. No, you can't grow. You'll be like the beasts of the field, etc. At the moment, you keep taking glory for all of this. And he's trying to show him in the interpretation of the dream how much he has already been eaten. So there's a warning to us, and there's a warning for you too. Signs if you have already been eaten. I know that you're really excited to get another list. So here comes the signs, all right? Signs that you may have already been eaten by the lion of taking control over your own life and not recognizing the control of God over you and his precious reign. Number one, you're a bear to live with. You're hard, especially in your house. You know why? Because that's your domain, that's your castle, that's your area of control. And you're hard because you're working so hard. It's there where you say the most of who you are. We act the most like who we are at home. And if you're always struggling to, if you will, have control, then anyone who impedes you will turn you into a bully, if you will, to dominate. They are the ones that are blocking you. So you will raise your voice, because raising your voice is a way to say, I don't have control, but I want it. I'm going to force it. That's what anger does. Number 2, you right fight a lot. You're not in your life necessarily looking for what is God teaching us, what is the circumstance, what is this, what is God correcting me with. If you're trying to be in control when God says, no, I am, and here's where you're not, then you're going to start to auto-justify. Because, see, you have to be on top. You're going to say, no, but I did this and I did that. I didn't do this and I didn't do that. That person did that. That person did this. And it's a constant fight about who's right. And Jesus comes one day and he says, hey, take the log out of your own face before picking a speck out of the face of another, or the eye of another. Nobody's right. Nobody's so self-righteous that you can't be wrong at least sometimes. And that's a problem if you're trying to be in control. You don't want to admit any time that there's any time to be wrong. And maybe this is a sign that you've already been eaten by the lion of taking control. 3, you measure people up so that later you can cut them down. You just kind of scope out who they are to make sure, okay, that's a weakness, and later if I'm going to take control, that's where I'm going, and I'm going to just point it out. Oh, you can't tell me where I'm wrong because, take a look, and we're trying to reinvent that. We have a log in our eye, and we're yelling at the other person, take the log out of your eye. Number 4, you present a confident exterior, but you have a fragile interior. It's fascinating to read so many people that actually are, the psychological thinking and way is many people are insecure, trying to present a facade of great security, but inside there's great self-loathing. Because you didn't make control, you set your standards, you didn't arrive at your standards, you didn't meet it, so then you end up just beating yourself up and hating yourself. But guys, just for an encouragement for you who experience this, where there's insecurity and self-loathing and hatred and just always not making the mark in your own life, quick encouragement, look inside. Who did God actually make you to be, and why are you beating up his child? Why are you hating a new creation of God if you are really in Christ? It might be because that's what the idol of control does. Power grabbing, the will to power, puts us in a place where we have to vaunt ourselves. But once we're out from under the power of God, we're really all alone and on shaky ground. And that's just the human heart. So we experience. Number 5, you regularly have drinks with cynicism and superiority. Cheers. I'm trying to write this in a way you're going to remember. You sit down and you're regularly toasting, I knew it, look it, it's exactly like I said that they were, this is exactly like I said it was going to happen, because a cynic steps back and steps up. Steps back to say, I'm the judge, I took the fruit, of the knowledge of good and evil, and so I'm a cynic, I step back, I can see what nobody else sees, I can determine what's good and bad for them and for me, and then it's also superiority. You have to step up one more and put them down so that you can, control. Proverbs 16, verse 5. Superiority is an abomination before the Lord, and it will never go unpunished. Proverbs 16:5. Number 6, then you are very quick to jump to conclusions about others. You want to put your control narrative over the lives of others, and maybe you don't understand where they're coming from. Maybe you're not on the same frequency. Maybe you don't understand the motivations or the circumstances or the others. Because you don't want to give grace, you want to have control, take control. These are very easy things. You're like, but Pastor, you're supposed to only give 5. That's on the other list. There's 6 things on this one. Don't take control, right? Maybe you've been eaten. If you see, let's say it this way. If you recognize any one of these things on this list, now's the time where it's time to surrender or be eaten alive by that. Right here, right now, it's to say, God, forgive me. God, teach me to give grace. Teach me what it means to learn this in you, to practice the gospel. Teach me this, Lord. I was, one of our sisters from our first service came up to me after I taught this today, and she looked at me with kind of a half smile, and she said, I think I felt like you were teaching that message right at me, which I wasn't. The point was that she was identifying. She said, when you said, if you identify with one of these things on that list, she goes, I looked over at my husband and I wrote all 6. It was terrible. But she laughed and said, I need to repent. So praise God. Number 3. There's a warning about the pride of control. That's 2. God. Then Daniel goes in and he starts to, well, the story happens where Nebuchadnezzar does not listen to Daniel's warning. Daniel warns because he's a pastor of this transforming Nebuchadnezzar, this rebirthing king, if I can say it that way. And he's telling him, if I can go back to between 2 and 3 here. This is 2.5, okay? It's not on the screen. Daniel is telling Nebuchadnezzar, King, there's a way to avert this and to get away from what being chopped down, from the fulfillment of this dream. And here's what it is. You have to stop acting like an emperor. You have to turn into a generous, merciful person. You need to be a human. So, yes, you're an emperor, but you got to quit acting like it. Okay, does that make sense? He's saying, Daniel's saying, you need to become more like me. You have to start over because, you see, you brought me into exile and we started over. We were 17 years old, 18 years old. We started over with eating seeds and nuts and things and plants. And so we started here, and God's been growing us in this. You too need to start over, similar to Adam. You need to come back. You need to have sacrifice. And through Abel, if you will, start the process in the line of the Lord again. You need to start over. Now, you need to, and he gives them 2 things. He says, you've been merciless. You've been unconcerned. So stop your sins and repent. That's the first thing. The second thing is, stop ignoring the people who are under you because you think you're so powerful and full of glory yourself. Okay? He would arrange times. The idea here is he would arrange times for many of the working class to be fed, and they would come into the city to be fed, and then he wouldn't feed them. And then his excuse would be, but if I feed all these people and if I spend the money to do that, I can't keep building beautiful Babylon, which he's so proud of because it's his own achievement. And what he's saying is you're unconcerned and you're ignoring the hurting around you. You see a world where there is no hurt and you don't care. You need to care and be concerned. Now, if you do that and if you repent and you're compassionate, then you can avert the consequence. And Nebuchadnezzar says, okay, yes, I'll do that for 12 months. And the dream kind of fades, and of course he's alarmed, and the alarm kind of fades because he's like, all right, this is good, nothing's happening. All right, well, I guess I learned the lesson. And then he's standing up on top of his palace. And as he's standing up, and very same language as 2 Samuel chapter 10, 11, and that is where David stands on top of his palace, and he looks out, and he's admiring all of Babylon. And he says, isn't this the great Babylon that I have built? And right there in our passage it says, while the very words were coming out of his mouth and on his lips, at the very moment, God was intimately involved. He was listening. He was right there. God awakened an angel called a watcher. And the watcher was awakened, and he says, bring your axe. And he brings him down, and he sends him down, and he says, chop him down. And in a voice from heaven, the voice of probably the same voice, either of the Father or of the Son who was in the furnace, when he should have learned his lesson from the last chapter, there he is crying out and says, Nebuchadnezzar, today, this day, your control is taken away from you. And what does he do? He reduces him to being less than human. Because what does it say? He turns animal-like. He turns into, if you will, a bird. That has another symbolism, but we don't have time to go into it. He grows long hair, looks like feathers going down his back and body. He's got talons for nails, fingernails, etc. And he's eating not just grass. That's a wrong interpretation. We think of him out there like a cow and like an ox. But he's eating plants. He's eating the food, the same food that Daniel ate back in chapter 1. What's God doing? He's rebirthing him. He's making him go out. He said, you're not fully a human, and you're taking glory like you are. I'm going to reduce you, and then you come back in. And then you come back in. And how does he remake him? Well, he turns him insane. Now, it says for a time of 7 times or 7 periods. A lot of times in our English versions, it translates to 7 years. But most likely, that word of times is the word for months. So he snapped. He snapped. And this is a time when God has convicted him, and now comes the consequences for trying to always have power, glory, and control. And the more that we practice that, the more we begin to say things, think things that we would have never said and never thought before. We're becoming more animalistic, more mean and cruel and indifferent. We're becoming jaded and cynical, sarcastic and spiteful, full of rancor, remorse, and also vendetta and revenge. It's all filling up in our heart. That's being like an animal. And that's what's happening. When you become so self-satisfied, you snap. Because we need to be glory satisfied, not with our own, but with his. One of the authors wrote this: perhaps the true insanity belonged to the Nebuchadnezzar who had earlier been talking as if he were the eternal king and as if God did not exist. He was already insane when he started speaking like that at the beginning of this chapter. I thought that was keen there. Then another one, Blaise Pascal, he wrote this. He was a great mathematician in France. In his Pensées, he wrote, only a madman thinks that he's actually a king or an emperor, that he would take control over everything. Politics is the house rules of an insane asylum. Basically, what it is there's rules which control a bunch of people walking around like demigods, thinking they are gods. And what he's talking about, what Blaise is getting at, is there's a madness for those who are driving and striving for control in no matter what area they are, whether it's in their house or whether it's in Congress. Because what happens is when there's a quest for control, when we believe in that lie, then we go on a hunt for glory. We're glory hunting. Instead of receiving it, we're hunting for it. And if you're in chapter 6 of our book of counterfeit gods in your discipleship, I know a lot of you are going to recognize this. Tim Keller said this: pride makes you a predator and not a person. You become what you worship. And if you're a control freak, you're a control worshiper. So you become an animal because you're hunting for it. You want it. You want everybody's affirmation. You want man's approval. You drive for it. You force the exterior of it. And yet you're going insane on the inside. Just going nuts. And we saw that insanity. But God used that insanity to change and convert Nebuchadnezzar. And here's the beauty of grace. Grace comes in and heals our will to power. And that is from insanity to praise. The last few verses of the chapter are what happens in the last testimony of King Nebuchadnezzar that we will hear from. These are his last words to the world for us. Nebuchadnezzar is, if you noticed, he's being reborn. He's eating big exile food. In other words, he's changed position from king out into the wilderness, only where he can meet God. He has to repent. He's from the highest now to the lowest. He has to come back in. He has to realize he's out before he can actually come back in as a human. Who is he prefiguring in this? He reminds us of Nicodemus. Remember Nicodemus? Ruler, his name means ruler of the people. Ruler of Jerusalem, teacher, comes before the Lord, Jesus, How do you have this connection with God that I don't have? Jesus simply answers him, listen, you must be born again. You have to go out to come back in. You must start over. You need to start again. And Nicodemus' response was sarcastic, wasn't it? It was sarcastic. It's like, hey, that's not a great prospect, neither for myself or for my mother. We both don't agree that this is a good thing to do. What was God talking about? You got to be like Nebuchadnezzar. You're a leader, and you need to be abased. You need to become a new human. You need to become a new Adam. You see, you need to be discipled by Pastor Daniel standing in front of you because he's been growing. Follow him. And now there's a fifth person. Remember what we said 5 is that domination. Now there's a fifth person whom God is using. It just happens to be the king of all of the empire. And how do we know this? Because he brings him down in humiliation. He humbles him. Nebuchadnezzar confesses after this of his sin. Nebuchadnezzar becomes merciful. But the other thing is that when you start over, like when you come into Christ, what happens? You're baptized, aren't you? Did you catch where Nebuchadnezzar was baptized? It says 3 times that he was washed with the dew from heaven over and over and over, renewed every day. He was being baptized for months. Start from heaven. This was divine work that God was working on his heart. And the moment that he emerges from that insanity, the insanity of his sin, he confesses to the whole empire, I'm not God anymore, but here's the God of gods. How do you defeat this line of control like Nebuchadnezzar did? Number 1, Daniel says to have control, you need to admit that you're not in control. To have it, you got to admit that you're not in it or that you don't. And I know that sounds like an oxymoron, but really, you are given, if you will, authority to live in your life, yes, to take self-control, but under his image. Number 2, if you've sinned, if this has really got a hold of your life, if this is eating you alive, power, glory, control, be like Nebuchadnezzar in this sense. You need to be born again. Go confess right now, today. Start over. Let God, if you will, snap that insanity and fill your heart with and mouth with praise. Start with childlike faith. Because Nebuchadnezzar came out of that insanity time like a brand new child, a baby, to grow in God. Number 3, you need to start being more concerned for others and to serve them mercifully. It is a characteristic if someone's trying to have power, you're not going to want to give power. Take the power of God in what he gives salvation and do that to wash feet. Where is someone hurting? No, don't take advantage, but take God's control and apply it in mercy. Number 4, you need to look up at the ascension. See, a lot of times when you're taking control, you're always looking down at someone else. There's that superiority. But you'll never relinquish control unless you see the beauty of the gospel of the ascension, where the King of all kings ascended into heaven. Now, he kept saying, I will not take from the vine, I will not drink from the vine, no more wine until I'm with my Father in heaven. Do you remember that after he resurrects from the dead? What is he saying? He's saying, you see, the vine or that fruit, that drink is a kingly drink. I'm not taking from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil until God passes it to me. And where is that? When he's inaugurated as King of Kings in heaven. So Jesus shows us the way. He resists the temptation of Satan to take power and control early, and then he resists the temptation by saying, I will not drink until God concedes it to me. And when you look up at the ascension, you say, that's my Lord, a man standing in control for me. And that takes a lot of pressure off of your life, guys. It does. Because you don't have to be in control because there's someone for you who already is. And that's the good news. You must learn the ascension and look up at him. There is a man in human flesh with a perfect body waiting for you to heal you, to love you, to forgive you, to help when you go to heaven to reign with him. And now together, when we eat the bread of the tree of life at the Lord's Supper, and we drink the kingly drink of wine at the Lord's Supper, we are reigning with him as priests and kings on the earth. Number 5, you better humble that little Nebuchadnezzar inside of you, or I'm going to come and ask you about it. No, I'm kidding. We got to humble the little Nebuchadnezzar inside of us. Every one of us has one. And sometimes what I'm trying to say is, if you humble him, if you humble yourself and you come into faith like this, you become a new Nebuchadnezzar. Paul says it this way: do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Here's how you humble yourself before others mercifully. That's point 3. Let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others. On the form of a servant, he steps down into our likeness. And being found in human form, he humbles himself by becoming obedient, even to the point of death, obedient to the Father's call. Therefore, God now has highly exalted Jesus and bestowed on him the name that's above every other name. What is that name? So that at the name of Jesus, every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth. Not at my name, not at my dominion, not at Nebuchadnezzar's name, but at the name of Jesus. That's practicing the ascension right there. And that's what Nebuchadnezzar did. And that will humble Nebuchadnezzar so that these same words will come out. Would you look at these? Here's the good news. Nebuchadnezzar says it. And now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor the King of heaven, for all his works are right and his ways are just. He has gracious control. And those who walk in pride, he is able and willing to humble. This is a man who's received grace. And it's almost like Nebuchadnezzar reaches out through history to us, into the future to us. And he says, guys, I'm your brother now. Take it from my life. Humble yourself well, because God is good and God is gracious and God is great. And he's in control. And you will be fully satisfied. A lot of pressure will be taken off. Amen?